Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Culture Clash podcast, where Russian and American discuss and debate some of the hot news topics from the recent news. I'm Michael.
I'm Vlad. Hello, everyone.
And our four topics for today are Andrew Tate is looking to become Prime Minister of the UK with his brand new Bruv party. We're going to be discussing the DE&I situation and the rollback of DE&I at a lot of major U.S. companies. Meta is going to be removing its fact checkers and the implications around that. And then finally, Donald Trump is looking to expand the U.S. to Greenland and then also possibly the Panama Canal and Canada. So we're going to discuss that. So with that, let's get started. Vladislav, first question for you.
Wow, you shocked me with my full name.
That's your name, isn't it?
Yeah.
Are you surprised by being...
Nobody calls me by my full name. That's why I'm surprised.
Well, sometimes people call you Vladimir.
Exactly.
Right?
Everybody confuses this.
For me, it's like... we need to start again? Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Okay.
That was nice, actually.
I know. That was unfortunate.
That was a good one.
Vladislav.
I will always laugh.
Are you good?
This. Yeah.
Is that not your name? Why are you laughing? What's the funny?
It is. It is my full name. Good.
Okay. It's not Vladimir, right?
No, it's not. And this is why I'm not used to be called by my full name, because like everybody calls me Vlad, but when people not from Russia hear Vlad, they think it's for Vladimir, and which is not true.
In your case, it's not true. But usually, I think most people in Russia who are Vlad would be Vladimir, right?
No. Not a single person who is called Vlad is a Vladimir in Russia.
Whatever, bro. This is over my head. I've been to Russia so many times, and I studied the language for a long time, and I'm still confused by that, but okay. Fair enough. I was going to say, I called you Vladimir for the first few times, so.
For the first, 11 months that we know each other?
Well, I think I then continued it just to, for effect, but yeah, fair enough. Anyways, Vladislav, however you want to be called. First question for you. Andrew Tate, you know this guy, yeah?
Yeah, unfortunately.
You've heard of him?
Unfortunately.
Fair enough. I think probably a lot of people might agree with that sentiment.
I hope so.
He has some fans. He's got a lot of followers. We'll get into that. But I don't know if you heard the news. Well, actually, I know you heard the news because it's one of our topics, right? Andrew Tate has announced that he's creating a new political party in the UK. Now, this guy, right, he's been living in Romania for, I don't know, a couple of years. He's a dual citizen between the UK and the US. He's creating a party called the Bruv Party. My question to you, Vlad, is Andrew Tate, internet celebrity, professional troll, more or less, is he a legitimate candidate, and is he a legitimate threat to become Prime Minister of the UK with his new Bruv Party?
Let me try not to laugh. No. Simply no. I don't think that he will create some fuss. He will create some noise about this, and probably we will read something on X or on Instagram in some short videos about this. But no, absolutely not. Because if you think from multiple perspectives, if you think logically, if you want to become the significant political figure in the UK, you need to get some proper electoral base, which is not that easy to do. And there were people who tried to do this. There were people who tried to build the parties. They were not very successful about this. Then, if he wants to do so, he needs to make this Bruv party a proper party to get the majority in the parliament in order to be elected as a prime minister or someone. So,
are you saying the Bruv party is illegitimate? Is that what you're saying?
Bruv party is
illegitimate.
Illegitimate. Yeah. And then...
What does it stand for, by the way?
Bruv is Britain restoring underlying values.
Jesus.
Underlying values. Bruv. But I think bruv is a slang word, right?
Yeah. It's like bro.
Bro.
Bruv. Yeah, it's a very British term. Yeah.
Yeah, so, the first thing, right? He needs to get the established party. He needs to, this party needs to win the general election. And then this party should nominate him for being the prime minister. And he needs to win this parliament vote. So this is a multi-layer thing. And second and this is not the most important thing, but the most important thing is he's nothing and nobody. Why we should even care about it? He has 7 million followers on X and Instagram. Wow.
What I understand, it's about 10.
Okay.
By the way.
Anyway, okay. Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo has 100. Should they create the party and go be elected?
I think they'd be competitive, to be honest. But anyways, go on.
Then, okay, what is like behind his like loud words and behind him being self-proclaimed misogynist? What is his like values and party and what he can bring on the table? His business empire, where like what he made women working for him and making the hot videos. I don't really think
Hot
so.
videos. Have you seen them?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
I'm married.
I was gonna. You're married. Good answer, and I hope you haven't.
And that was quick, right?
Yeah, that was. Wow, good answer. It's almost like you had that memorized. Hopefully, Dasha sees that and appreciates it that you're ready with that answer. But yeah, sorry. Go on.
Yeah, good one. Yeah. So basically, simplifying all of that, I think he has no basis. However, there is one point that I find interesting in this particular point is British political system might need some shaking up, and he can bring some elements of the shaking up over there. But overall, I don't think that this is the type of shake up they need. I think they need like the proper active professional politicians, because that's what I personally observed for the recent 3 to 5 years, that the professional level of the politicians like going down significantly because nobody wants to go to the politics, I guess, or maybe. So yeah, first, I don't think he's a legitimate candidate. Second, I don't think he has any basis to get anything significant. But third, I believe that this might be a good show and good shaking up for a British political system. What do you think?
Good question. Look, I think fair take. Honestly, I want to disagree with you because I think basically I prefer to disagree with you in general. We do argue a lot. In this, I wasn't exactly sure when I first read the story what I was going to say. Upon further review, I got to be honest, I don't think he's a legitimate candidate. I don't think he actually has as you said, a path to victory. And again, as we talk about him as a controversial figure, in no way is this obviously condoning anything he's been accused of. He's been accused of some pretty terrible things, right? So again, we're not judges. We're not, any of these people. We're just commenting on the news. So look, I think, however, all that being said, I think it's an interesting phenomenon, interesting for a few reasons. So I disagree with you completely when you say he's nobody. I think that's a ridiculous comment, and I think, I was pretty ignorant, to be honest. And the reason for that, 10 million followers on X is not nothing. That's 10% of Messi. That's 10% of Cristiano Ronaldo. These are two of the most famous footballers in history. 10 million people. That's a lot of people. That's point one. He was the third most Googled person in 2023. Third most on the planet. This guy is
for how
somebody.
Long? For one day?
I don't know if it was for one day, but third most Googled person on the planet. Dude, I mean, that's pretty high. I mean, where was Donald Trump? Probably number one would be my guess. But then who else? Putin, Xi? I have no idea. But the point is, if you're a top 3 Googled person, people know who you are.
I think
you're making noise.
I think at a certain point, like hurricane can become the most Googled asset in Google,
So,
or
okay. So the hurricane.
fire, or
Fire.
I don't know.
Fair point. I mean, look, so if the hurricane is going to run for prime minister, that's a different thing. But my only point is he's not nobody, right? He's got an online following. He's extremely well known. Name ID is very important, right? So a lot of times what these politicians them doing is in the beginning when they're running for office, they need to establish their brand. They need people to know them. I totally agree with you, though, on the UK point. So what we saw in Romania, where this guy came out of nowhere as a far-right candidate, out of the blue, that's not possible.
You mean what we discussed last time?
Yeah, this exactly. The discussion we had around, the crazy situation in Romania.
Okay.
So that's not possible, as you said, because you need a political party first and foremost. The party has to win. So, for example, Tate can't run for prime minister and just suddenly be elected. His Bruv party has to be elected. And then, and again, I think people, I agree. I don't think he's a legitimate candidate. I don't think there's anything that's going to come from this. But I also wanted to sort of calibrate my response to this because I fell for the Trump sort of, not syndrome, but I fell for the Trump phenomenon in 2015 when he first declared his candidacy in the U.S. And I said there's no way he's going to win. I was saying that. And then a lot of people around me who also, by the way, a lot of Republican voters as well. Oh, I don't think he's actually serious about running. I don't think he has a chance. Then he ends up being president again. So I don't ever want to underestimate somebody who is famous, by however metric you want to make it. I don't want to underestimate the possibility. Fine. But then if you go to his platform, and again, why I thought this was a bit more interesting than met the eye was his platform was what? Far right. Restoring values, which has been a consistent theme in Europe, in France with the National Rally Party, the AfD in Germany, in this Romania situation, all the far-right themes we've talked about, actually, Tate's BRUV concept is trying to emulate those things. Harsh on immigration, all of these things, same pattern. So that I thought initially was actually kind of interesting and would have been an opening, until I then did a bit more research and saw currently the UK's already has a party that's trying to fill that gap. So did you see the latest poll? Probably not. I mean, the next election in the UK is not till 2029.
No.
You haven't seen the latest polls.
No.
So traditionally you've got Conservative and Labour as the two parties, right? The Conservatives won, Boris Johnson, and then you had, they had like a couple of prime ministers, ended with Rishi Sunak, and then they just suffered a massive defeat at the hands of the Labour Party. There's a third party in the UK called the Reform Party, led by a guy named Nigel Farage. This guy,
I heard about
you probably heard of this guy. This guy was the main marketer for Brexit. So they're actually polling right now 1 point behind Labour Party in second place. So ahead of the Conservatives. This is a far-right party, essentially with the same platform as this BRUV concept, which is harsh on immigration, nationalism, energy independence, restoring traditional values. So whatever Tate's trying to do, I think it's more marketing than anything. And he is a marketing guy. So I have to say, I do agree with you in the final conclusion. I don't think this is like legitimate or serious. I think this is marketing. But the basic framework of what he's talking about, I think does have to be taken seriously, because it's the same trend and the same theme we're seeing across Europe. Germany, France, Italy, Poland, Hungary, Romania, we've talked about it ad nauseum. So I don't think it's going to be BRUV or Tate. I don't think there's really any seriousness behind that in terms of legitimate chance. But the Reform Party, which is essentially the same concept, I do think that has a pretty good chance. That could be the next party that's going to emerge and take power in the UK. So that's my take.
Interesting. You took like more balanced approach, which I usually take, and I must agree with you on the point of the Reform Party. It's an interesting point, and I would add on this that I think that we have some sort of demand in overall society for non-standard politicians, like non-standard meaning someone like active with a fresh mind, with a fresh view,
tells it like it is.
Yes, yep. Yes. No double speaking. No, exactly. Tells it like it is, and like bringing something new.
Are you saying that the world wants more of Donald Trump? Is that essentially what you're talking about?
Not necessarily Donald Trump, but like if you look at this, like Donald Trump is not a standard politician, right? If we go back to 2019 to Ukraine, Zelensky was not a standard politician. Like he won because of largely because of the TV show. All right. So, okay. If we go even like further back, I think Ronald Reagan was also a good example of non-standard politician.
Actor.
And exactly, like actor. And I think what we again saw in the far-right movement, the non-standard politicians, they get their platforms. And yeah, it's interesting. Like we haven't prepared our positions, right? And I remember when we were selecting the topics, you said like, I will probably root for Tate.
Whoa, root. Okay, whoa. Root means I'm wanting him to win. No. I never said that.
Okay.
Don't implicate me as being a pro-Tate guy. That's not what I'm saying. I said it was interesting and thought-provoking because I thought he was talking to these same issues, which he is, but there's already a party talking about these issues. Bro, you're trying to throw me under the Tate bus. Don't throw me under that bus, man. I don't want to be under that bus.
Okay. So you don't want to be associated. Good.
Yeah, I mean,
good.
Look, I know I don't want to be. I don't want to be associated. The allegations are serious, and obviously we condemn everything. Obviously, that's not a good thing to be associated with. I don't want to associate with anybody. I don't want to take a political position. Actually, I don't want to go and be overtly political. My only point was I could initially see the parallels between conceptually a bit with Trump, not in all the baggage with the individual personality, but the concept, as you said, non-traditional politician speaking a we can call it far right in the traditional sense, but it's really becoming the new right.
I think if you take like Trump and Tate is way more far right.
Sure, but I think Trump has also moved the Republican Party further right. And I think, anyways, traditional politics pre-Trump era was you had traditional left, traditional right, which had developed in sort of the post-Cold War era, where they really largely agreed on most things. And then it was Trump who came in with these heterodox positions, which were unconventional, new to an extent, and that nationalist, America first, hard on immigration, traditional values, all of those things, which people always thought was actually a losing message, and then Trump found a way to make it a winning message and tapped into something that people didn't think was there. So I think that was what I initially thought, oh man, could he be trying to do the same thing? To me, that has to be taken seriously because, for example, I didn't take it seriously to my own fault. I thought, no, come on, this guy's, he's talking about things that nobody really thinks are going to be that popular. And,
you're talking about Trump.
I'm talking about Trump. I'm talking about 9 years ago. And then what happens? The dude wins 2 of the last 3 presidential elections. And he's a political force for nature. He's going to go down as one of the most impactful, definitely American politicians in history. You could argue in modern global history. The dude is sort of redefining.
Yeah, I agree.
U.S. politics. So I thought when you got a celebrity speaking that sort of populist message, you have to take it seriously. On further thought and analysis, I'm not taking it seriously, but I'm taking the message and the position seriously. And I think you need to take any person, any politician who has that non-traditional appeal, as you said, that has to be taken seriously. When paired with that populist message, then I think that could be a force.
Okay.
But as we agree, probably not Tate.
Okay. So over the past decade, I think we have seen the huge rise of the new departments in the companies. Like everybody got their chief diversity officers, DEI departments, DEI movement, whatever. And that was like an established corporate movement. But now, if we look at the major companies, they are removing these DEI departments. Meta, McDonald's, Amazon, Walmart, Google. I think
Is that how you do 5 in Russian? It becomes
No.
I was like, is that a Russian?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I can do like this.
Yeah, that's the
So I think I just named like half of the American economy.
Probably.
Or 15%.
It might be. Yeah.
Anyway, so the large, loud names, big companies, they remove these DEI departments. They remove the positions of chief diversity officers. Why do you think this is happening? And do we see the end of DEI era?
So 2 questions in there. I want to answer both. I think the first thing, let me take the first question that you asked. Why is this happening? Interestingly, I remember having this conversation with some of my colleagues at the time, maybe 7-8 years ago when I first came out to the region. And I was questioning, what is DE&I all about and what is the objective? So the theory behind DE&I, right, diversity, equity, inclusion, is that by promoting these DE&I concepts and agenda and hiring metrics, you're actually going to bolster the performance of the organization, right? That's the idea. That's the concept.
You have more diverse opinions. Right. You consider more perspective.
Sure.
And that's why you make high quality decisions and it leads to the better performance.
That's the theory. Okay. So why I think companies are getting rid of that is because, fine, it sounds good on paper. How do you actually, how do you measure the impact of DE&I? How do you quantify DE&I? And how do you actually hire for it? Diversity could be measured in 1,000 different metrics. So for example, what I noticed when we're talking about DE&I is that all these companies are essentially framing DE&I from a diversity perspective, from a, what does that mean? Racial perspective, religious perspective, in the US and the West, sexual orientation, even to the trans point, so these were the metrics. But diversity could be 1,000 other things. It could be diversity of thought. It could be diversity of education background. It could be diversity, in these other ways. So I think the problem was it was always poorly defined, and it seemed to be more marketing than actual substance. So you never really saw any true correlation, I think, from these companies that their DE&I programs, their specific implementation of DE&I was actually causing any type of value creation. And again, if you think about it, what are you doing? You're hiring in a certain way. That means you're paying a lot of C-suite in some cases, right? Chief Diversity Officer.
Yeah.
This is a C-suite position. You're going to be paying a lot of money for a C-suite person, for an entire team devoted to picking candidates and trying to push within the organization these concepts. Those concepts, again, are always going to be open to interpretation. At what level is enough diversity enough? Is it when you've got a perfect balance of race within the society? Is it perfect gender balance? Is it perfect LGBTQ representation? Is it perfect thought diversity? You will never achieve these things. And at what cost do you then have as an organization overly emphasizing these things at the risk of losing the actual core metrics of the actual position and the actual role, that the job has in the organization? So I think it was always, from my perspective, a bit of an aspirational concept and pretty superfluous, honestly, if you ask me. And again, I'm not coming out against like all elements of it, right? I'm not saying like diversity, equity, and inclusion are terrible things. I think diversity in principle is good, right? Inclusion is good in principle, but how you implement it is tremendously complicated, and I think has been the problem up to this point. So I think that's why we're seeing companies scale back. I also think, by the way, this had something to do with the era of free money and 0% interest rates, if you really ask me. I think, again, when companies are able to borrow money sort of with very low interest rates, when you've got money to spend and the economy is growing, everybody then wants to spend on sort of the good to have elements of the corporate apparatus. Now what do we see? Interest rates are higher. The economy is coming under a bit more pressure. Now we need to cut back. And where are we going to cut back? Naturally, the areas that are not core, not revenue producing, and that maybe seem like, we could do without you. Because I think, let's be honest, all companies can do without their DE&I departments. I mean, I think that's a fact, right? It's not core to the business by any metric. Fine. So that would be my first answer as to why I think that's going away. And then 2, is the era over? I do believe it's over. Again, I think the basic framework was, it was an attempt by the corporate world to achieve a political objective without a clear business case as to why that objective needs to be achieved. Or how do you actually do it? How do you make DE&I clear, concise, and value creating? Great. You want to emphasize certain elements of diversity. All elements of diversity? To what extent? When is it enough? Is it ever enough? I think at some point, having an entire department catered to this with all these employees, all these well-paid employees, I think was always a difficult business case to make. So I do think in this era of, again, the economy is not doing all that great in most places, higher interest rates, no clear, correlation between these departments have created all this additional business value. I do think the era is over, and I think that's what we're seeing. But what's your take?
I'm not sure if the era is over, because I don't think that they will, roll it out. No, not roll it out. I'm not sure that they roll it back so quickly.
Are you saying that because you think you were a DE&I hire? Is that what you're worried about? That you were a diversity hire?
I think. Oh, this is actually an interesting term you just introduced, diversity hire. Mm-hmm. Let's circle back on that.
Yeah.
So I don't think that I was diversity hire, by the way, because Dubai has everything is about diversity over here. We have 60 people with 50 different nations, 40 different nations in our office.
Probably. Yeah. United. It's like the United Nations.
Yeah, United Nations, exactly. So I don't think that the era itself is over. I don't think that the values and the idea of DE&I will disappear. But I do believe that removing the dedicated departments and the chief diversity officer positions and someone like that is a good thing. I don't think I totally agree with you that there were no measurable research that would prove that they brought some additional value. Even though in the very beginning it was very promising, and I saw even some numbers that it will boost your productivity to 30, 40, 45%, pick a number. But you mentioned a very good thing, diversity hire. And I think that's what really harmed the DEI movement in general, these ideas. Because I firmly believe that the meritocracy is why we should hire people, why we should have people in the organizations, and actually like everywhere. And when you have diversity hire, you say that, having the diversified workforce, diversified, again, without any specific criteria, is more important for me as an organization, as a company, for my business results, than having capable people, than having meritocracy. I'm not saying that these two substances never meet. I'm not saying that diversity hire is never a meritocracy hire. But I do believe that if you have certain quotas, if you have certain rules that we need to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people from this group or this group or this group, first, you're ruining inclusivity by this, because you're saying them we need to have specific quotas, so they are different. But the point of DEI is to tell them, well, we are all pretty much the same, we're all equal. So you ruin this inclusivity and equality over here. And second, you're ruining meritocracy. So I do believe that the values of DEI, they're good, they will stay, and they will probably introduced by the companies in somewhat different way. And why it's happening, I totally agree with you. It's something that is considered non-essential. It's something that is non-measurable. It is something that is considered, and another point, I'm sure all these companies, they will say, we reached that level of inclusivity and equality and diversity that we don't need these departments anymore. That's what I think.
I totally agree. But I want to hone in on one more point that you mentioned. And this really bothers me, to be totally honest, because I actually agree with you. Look, diversity is a good thing. If I'm a company, for example, look, I'm going to take the team I work on. I had a conversation with a pretty senior business leader today, actually, about this topic.
Okay.
She's a woman, extremely competent, extremely impressive, absolutely somebody to emulate in the company, regardless of gender, right? It's just, she is damn good at what she does, right? So it's not about the gender, but we did have conversation about it is good to have these complementary elements. So my team, for example, we're all men. I think we would benefit from hiring women on our team. I think there is this balance, absolutely, where everybody knows deep down you need this diversity. I think these elements, basically, as you said, the basic concepts, are very good to have, which is racial diversity. It's never going to hurt you. It can only help you. Gender diversity, it can never hurt you. It's only going to help you. But what do you need a whole department for? Why do you need not only a chief diversity? What do you do all day if you're a chief diversity officer, if you're a chief D&I officer? What are you doing? No, sir, I want to know, what does that person do? They report to the CEO and say what? Oh, yeah, we hired 2 more diverse people. I don't understand what the value in that is. And then not only that, they have a whole department. People reporting to that chief diversity officer, the CDO. Come on, do we really need that? If you're a good business leader, you're thinking about these problems. Okay, I can benefit from having a very competent woman because we don't have enough women on our team. Good thought. Or if it's a very female-heavy team, we need more men on the team, but we need to hire, obviously, he has to be competent. He has to be top-level competence. He has to be, maybe top of the pile, whatever the case is.
I think
that's business strategy.
I think if you have a competent, damn good candidate, it doesn't matter. True. Everything else doesn't matter.
I agree. Although I will say, I do think there's actual inherent value in the diversity for its own sake, but it can't come at the cost of merit, obviously, right?
Exactly.
So I'm saying there are instances, absolutely. Look, I would say on my team that I work on right now, if we had 2 equal candidates, a man and a woman, I think we would benefit from having the woman candidate.
Equal candidates.
Yes.
Equal candidates.
Yes, of course.
But I think when you have these quotas, what you lose, if you have someone, if you have not 2 equal candidates, but one, let's say, represented not enough in your company versus someone who is more competent versus the job responsibilities, I'm afraid the companies with the strong D&I agenda, they often choose someone who is non-represented enough.
Well, that's the risk, right?
That's the main risk, I guess.
Of course, and you're hiring an entire department to do that. to do that risky thing, which is to promote that. I just think the whole concept of that being a job in and of itself is why these companies are cutting. Why am I paying someone to tell me hire more diverse people? If you're a good manager, if you're a good leader of a company, an organization, a team, whatever, you will need to behave this way. And if you don't behave that way, the other team, company, etc., will do it. And if they do it, they're going to crush you. Because guess what? If you, for example, for whatever reason are not hiring women, maybe you have some implicit bias, or maybe you're not focused on hiring women, and another company out there offers a more welcoming environment, a better environment for women in particular, they'll take all the top-notch women, and guess what? You won't have any of them. And that's your loss as a business. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's a business leader. That's a C-suite decision, but you don't need a department. You don't need a separate job and a separate team to do it. I just think the whole concept really has been taken too far. So I think that is why it's being rolled back.
And I think there is even a term called woke capitalism. Have you heard about it?
I've heard of this. I don't even know what that means. What does that mean?
I don't know what it means. I haven't seen the definition, but I
don't want to see the definition.
I saw the term, but I think this is where actually, like, this is the illustration where companies take it too far left.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. I mean, capitalism, at the end of the day, it's about shareholder value. It's about creating value, get the best people. Why are we creating entire departments to tell us who to hire based on criteria that is not about merit? This, again, is what good leaders do. Good leaders are able to look past their own implicit biases.
Right.
And these principles, I totally agree with you, are very important.
Yes.
Absolutely. If you're a good business leader, you need to know, I need to make sure I've got diverse people in my boardroom. Okay, that's basic. And if you don't, then yeah, the data shows probably your decision-making won't be as strong. But do you need a whole department to tell you? I don't get that. I've belabored the point enough.
But I think that if we are wrong, I really believe that people who works in DEI departments or who are chief diversity officers, they will drop their comments.
Great.
I really want to see these comments if we have them.
Dude, and I totally agree. And this is the other thing. In the interest of diversity, what is part of diversity? Diversity of thought. So let's get from a DE&I employee, tell me why, or tell us why your role as, and again, we're not talking about people, by the way, I actually do work with DE&I initiatives. This is the grand irony, but it's not my only job, right? It's one element of the job that I chose to take on. Because again, I do believe in these concepts basically, but do you need an entire department for it? So if you do work in those departments, to your point, we'd love to see some comments and understand, you know, from an organizational perspective, why are you valuable? All right, Vladislav, next question. Ready?
I'm never going to...
You're not used to being called your actual name. What does your wife call you?
Vlad.
She never calls you Vladislav?
She calls me different names. I'd rather not.
Okay, all right, bro. Whoa.
I would not go there.
We don't need to know all of those things. That's between you and
her. Almost no one calls me by my full name. And actually, when you in Russia, when you call someone by the full name, it's very, very official. Very official. Like for me, for example, like everybody calls you Michael, right? And to me, it's a little bit weird. Like, why we don't call you Mike or Mikey or something like that? Everybody calls you Michael, and like this is how you introduce yourself.
You want to call me Mikhail? Would that be more natural for you, Misha? I've heard both.
Yeah, I think this is another thing that will confuse everybody about Russian names. Why Michael means Mikhail and Mikhail becomes Misha.
Yeah, man, it's funny. This is a very quick aside, but when I was in Russian class and we were picking Russian names, the teacher, Kapitan, he was...
Kapitan?
Kapitan is what we called him. It wasn't his actual name, obviously, because he had this thing called the Red October. He called, so... Dude, it's hilarious. So the...
he was very pro-USSR.
It's a very weird story.
Or it was an irony.
It's kind of an irony. Okay. He kind of was. He was like a Soviet patriot, but at the same time a proud American. It was a very bizarre kind of mix.
Okay.
But great guy. And the funny part was, and Roddy, our editor, actually took classes with Kapitan as well. He would know this. He had an annex to the actual school building that he called the Red October because it was like a trailer outside the main building. So we called it Krasny Oktyabr because it was separated from the main building and it looked like a submarine. It was like a trailer. Okay. You understand?
Yeah, I see.
And he was Kapitan of the Krasny Oktyabr. This is what we called him. This is what he had everybody call him, Kapitan.
You guys were creative.
Oh, dude, this was him. Anyways, so he asked me, oh, you'll be Misha, right? I was like, Misha, it sounds like a girl's name. Why am I Misha? Mikhail, right? I mean, it was like, I'd never heard of Misha. And who's named Misha anyway? I was like, dude, Mikhail is like Mikhail Gorbachev, common Russian name. So I went with Mikhail. And then I found out later Misha's actually the nickname for Mikhail. Anyways, it's a conversation for another topic, another time.
Absolutely.
Anyways, yeah. I almost forgot the original question.
That was a good side joke.
Yeah, dude, it's a funny story. Original question, Meta. Okay, so they're ending fact-checking on Facebook, right? So my question to you, Vlad, is that going to lead to higher quality information, better information, a more informed audience, or is it going to lead to, quote unquote, more misinformation, all of these things? And is it a net positive or net negative? What's your take?
Good question. I think
you came up with that question, but giving yourself some credit.
Good.
Anyway, sorry.
Good. Yeah, my question. Yeah. Anyways, so I believe that the social media, social networks, they need some kind of moderation, because like if you have the uncontrollable flows of information, then somebody will see something that they should not see. The way you deal with this, I think you need to, and I think that's what actually a lot of companies do. You need to have certain layers of moderation, and the largest one should be automated, and it should be non-biased. And I think one of the reasons why Zuckerberg said that they will remove these fact checkers is because they were actually very biased in the way they filtered the information. And I think actually he wants now to follow the X and the Musk's approach, where they don't have the fact checkers and they rely heavily on the algorithm. So yeah, overall, I think it might be a good one. If you know for the fact that your fact checkers, those guys who are checking the information and make sure that it's unbiased, if you know for the fact that they're actually biased, you're screwed. So I think that if they know it for a fact and they want to remove it and they want to clean it up, it's good. Another thing is, I believe that they have a hidden agenda over here, and I believe that they first like saving some money, because if you replace the team, the department with some sort of algorithm, you will save quite some money. And also, I kind of agree that, yeah, like he admitted a lot of allegations that during Trump campaign, Meta deprioritized his information and like his supporters. And I think in many other like hot media topics, they choose one on the other side, like as the traditional media does. So, and I think they try to kind of like clean it up right now. So yeah, overall, I think it might lead to a like better, high quality information if it's done right.
Yeah, I actually agree. But I want to take maybe a clearer stance maybe than you there. I think you were equivocating a bit. I think you weren't willing or courageous enough to take a strong position. I'll take the strong position. So, okay. So I do think, look, basically, I used to maybe have a slightly different opinion. I was a bit more, cut from the same cloth as you. I kind of thought the same. Then I saw what happened with the 2020 election. Mm-hmm. I saw what happened during COVID. And now I have to admit, even for me, I'm against any of these fact-checking metrics. I think basically... Look, I think it's very difficult to police. I think you need safe searching to make things safe for kids. Obviously, around anything having to do with that's very important. Obviously, you keep that. But fact-checking itself, as in moderate the facts. When it's clearly incorrect information, I do think, okay, fine, there's a room for the platform to be involved, but it's so difficult to police and it's so difficult to draw that line. So if you ask me, I prefer that line not to be drawn than to be drawn in the wrong place. Because what you end up happening, and what ends up, I think, being the consequence of drawing the line in the wrong place, is you lose all faith in the line itself and anything associated with that. To the point you mentioned, what happened with the 2020 election. Two big stories that poisoned the well, particularly with the right wing in America, and why I think Meta is obviously changing some of their policies. Are you familiar with the COVID lab leak theory?
COVID?
So obviously during COVID, you remember there was theories as to where COVID came from?
Lab leak.
The lab leak.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, of course.
So
I couldn't understand the word.
You criticized my English, or was that on you? Or?
I would love to criticize you English one day.
Go for it, bro. One day.
No.
I'm waiting for the day. You criticize my Russian all you want. It's not that great. But the lab leak theory. Right? Originally, people were saying COVID, right? The original consensus view was that it came from a pangolin out of a wet market in Wuhan, right? That's what people were thinking. Then very quickly, it arose a theory that, well, actually, this could have come from a biolab in Wuhan, which also happened to be, obviously, in Wuhan, in the same city. That was initially called misinformation. Mainstream media was considering that lab leak theory to be misinformation. So what would happen if you posted that on Meta or this or that? There might be one of these fact check message. Oh, this is not like the most popular position, or this is considered to be, potentially misinformation or something like that.
This would not say that it's not the popular position. It would actually say like this is not the proven thing. Go and check with official website.
But would they say that? Fine, but the official website didn't even know. So would they say, oh, if somebody said, oh, COVID came from a wet market, would there be the same thing at the bottom of that message saying, oh, this isn't proven? No, they wouldn't. There was the theory by the institutions, which was the U.S., Anthony Fauci, the health department, the NIH, whoever was the one pushing the theory. And then it would be the unpopular theory, so to speak. Well, guess what? The now official position of the U.S. government, including the Biden administration, was what? Most likely it came from the lab leak theory. So the issue, and that was just one point. So let me say the second point, and then I'll get to the conclusion. The Hunter Biden laptop. Do you remember this story? You might have not.
Yes. Okay. I know.
The Hunter Biden laptop. There was a laptop that came out that was then discovered, and it was attributed to Hunter Biden. And any mention of it in mainstream media was completely mothballed. It was completely censored. So everybody from Twitter at the time, for example, locked the account of the New York Post who had broke the story, and anybody who shared it, those posts were taken down, locked, or something like that. What the heck is that? In countries where you're supposedly have this First Amendment, right? Like the U.S., which stands by its freedom of speech and this and that. And you're going to pull something like that? Mark Zuckerberg was saying he was getting calls from the FBI about all this misinformation and how you have to do something about it. And what it ended up becoming was politically motivated. So what does that do when you're seeing, and by the way, the Hunter Biden laptop story, what did it come out to be? That it was accurate, that the laptop was real. Not all the insinuations necessarily were real about the implications, but you weren't even able to discuss it. So what is that? The point is, think about what that did. Those two incidents themselves. One had an impact on an election, and the other had an impact on people's lives, which was the COVID situation. So, what does that mean for trust in institutions? I mean, think about it. How far has trust in mainstream institutions fell since 2020? I would say pretty massively. Is that not impacting and helping to aid the rise of the far right, politicians who are obviously against the mainstream, all these things? So I think it's important to, if you're going to draw the line, you better draw it in the right place, or to be safer, don't draw it all and just have the basic minimum standards, which is protect the kids, make sure if you're saying something so blatantly incorrect, whatever, then, then that might be addressed. But I think Meta's doing the right thing. I have to say.
I do like the idea of moderation. Yeah, for the safety reasons, for sure. I do like the fact that in social media we can report something that we consider fake, or we disagree, or we see offensive, harassment, whatever. Again, I think it's a good thing. Again, when the society tells you this. Have you heard about the law of fakes in Russia?
No.
So after the conflict with Ukraine started, they introduced the law of
special
fakes.
Military operation.
Special military operation. Yes. When it started, they introduced the law of fakes. And fake is obviously English word. We don't have this word in Russian, but still we call it fakey. It's закон о фейках. So what it tells you is, if you post something which is against the official position of the Minister of Defense, this can be considered as a fake, and you can get a fine or even jail time. I think this is terrible. This is what it takes to the very hard extreme. This is what we cannot have. But I was actually thinking that this thing is a very Russian specifics, and oh my God, what happened with Russian law. But then I found out there are a lot of cases and a lot of stories where people got fined for certain reposts, for certain posts in social media in the UK.
Yeah.
And I was like, really?
Yep.
I was shocked. I was honestly shocked.
The UK has laws against what you're allowed to post on social media. Again, countries that are we're big into free speech, all these things. Really?
That's
are
crazy.
You? Yeah.
That's just crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, Michael. I think we all heard that Trump now says that he wants to expand the American geography. So how realistic are Trump's, I will call it threats, how realistic are Trump's threats to take Greenland, Canada, I don't know, maybe some other islands somewhere in Pacific Ocean, but let's focus.
He hasn't mentioned Russia yet, so don't worry about that. That's not apparently on the list.
I will skip
Actually,
that.
we took Alaska. Anyway, different story.
Oh, we will talk about Alaska for sure. I would love to. But overall...
Thank you, by the way.
Thank you for buying it. It helped us.
Anytime.
How realistic are Trump's threats to overtake Panama Channel, Canada, Greenland? I think we should focus on Greenland in particular. I think it's most interesting. So how realistic it is? Is it like the marketing or is it the real thing?
I've been waiting for this question the entire episode. Okay. I did a reaction to this when I was in Saudi Arabia. I guess it was last week.
It was on
TikTok.
On our Culture Clash podcast TikTok.
Yes, that's right. We'll post some link to it. It's funny. I've had a few conversations with people over the last 2 weeks or so since Trump made a lot of these announcements and all this other stuff. I really think people need to understand. Well, okay, fine. This is just my perspective. Greenland is 100% serious. 100% serious. And I'll go to the conclusion before I then go into the reasons. For me, and from my assumption, the U.S. will take control of Greenland during Trump's second administration. In the next 4 years, the U.S. will acquire Greenland. I 100% believe that. And so I think he's absolutely 100%. I think he means what he says. I think it's going to happen. And what I want to emphasize, this is not coming out of thin air. This is not coming out of the blue. I did the TikTok reaction. I'll very high level go into it. Greenland obviously is very strategically important, key American bases. It's part of our early warning system for missiles. So during the Cold War, if the Soviets were going to launch at us, they go over the North Pole. Greenland detects it. Greenland's got 43 of the 50 most critical rare earth metals. Currently, China is the biggest producer of those. It's got huge deposits of undiscovered oil and gas. And as the ice sheet starts to melt, there's a new waterway that's opening up, which soon will probably be open all year round. And that's going to the left of Greenland through the Canadian islands, which is going to connect the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. Russia and China want to take advantage of that. Okay, it's important, right? But let's understand something. The U.S. has been trying to take control of Greenland for a long time. So if you go into the history, and again, look, Greenland is the biggest island on the planet, by the way, but 56,000 people, right? It's a very small territory by population.
It's the continent-size island.
It's massive. Yeah, it's very big. But let's go into the history. The U.S. has been trying to acquire Greenland since 1868. This is not Trump. Everybody wants to make this, Trump is being his usual, nationalistic, jingoistic, imperialistic. This has been part of American thought, strategic thought for a long time, like 150 years. In 1868, there was an actual, so the same government, by the way, that bought Alaska from the Russians, commissioned a study to understand what are the benefits of acquiring Greenland and why should we do it. It was called, and the government published it, A Report on the Resources of Iceland and Greenland. They were also talking about Iceland. And it essentially called for the acquisition of Greenland. Very interestingly, and I will come to this, it also mentioned that annexation of Greenland would likely encourage Canada to join the U.S. I will get to that. But
they really mentioned annexation.
They mentioned it. Okay. And they mentioned that it would also have implications with Canada.
In 19th century.
1868. Yeah, exactly. By the way, another attempt was made 1910, over 100 years ago. 1946, after World War II. Because why? What happened? Denmark had control of Greenland. The Nazis went into Denmark and conquered it, I believe, in 24 hours. Maybe it was 48. Very quick. So Greenland, which was a key producer of one of the important war materials, the Americans seized it to prevent it from falling into Nazi hands. So the Americans obviously viewed it as pretty strategic.
And then they gave it back.
Then they gave it back, but with rights, military rights, to stay and have permanent bases and have unencumbered access from a military perspective, but let Denmark keep it. 1955, that was the last offer that was made. So this is not the first time the U.S. is trying to acquire Greenland. It's been viewed from a strategic point of view for a long period of time. Trump is not coming out of the blue here. And if you look at what makes Greenland important, why it's relevant for American strategic, objectives and all of this, I want to add one other element. Can you imagine the political implications if Trump is able to accomplish this? We all agree that Trump is a personality-driven guy. He likes to be viewed as popular and beloved and the attention, right, from the media. Can you imagine what would happen if he were to acquire Greenland and would be able to take it to the American public and tell everybody, look at this, guys, I just acquired Greenland. I'm not going to try the accent on this episode, but, he just acquired Greenland. It would be the biggest purchase or land expansion in U.S. history. It would be bigger slightly than the Louisiana Purchase of 1803. It would be massive. Biggest expansion of U.S. territory ever in a single go. There's a lot of reasons, strategic, military, economic, and for Trump specifically, political and legacy, that I absolutely think in this modern era, when the U.S. is relatively unencumbered by major strategic opponents, by major Cold War obligations or anything else, I think the U.S. will go for it. And I don't think Denmark really is going to be able to, if America makes an offer and offers whatever the amount of money is, maybe it's some pressure with tariffs, I don't see how the U.S. won't be able to make a deal to acquire Greenland. So I think 100% that's serious. Then I'll go Panama Canal, and then I'll go back to Canada real quick. Panama Canal, the story with it, I actually think this is probably the least serious, to be honest. I don't think the U.S. will actually take back the canal. I think the U.S. just wants to renegotiate, some of the arrangements with the canal, maybe take over some operating of it to some extent. Right now, I think some Chinese companies operate it fine.
And canal is like more infrastructure rather than the state.
Right. It's not a major, strategic or territorial objective. It's really just, do we have access? Are we paying too much? I really think that's what the question is. So to give you an idea, and the U.S. history with the canal actually goes back a long way. So the Panama Canal was built and completed in 1914. The U.S. gave back the Panama Canal in 1977 under Jimmy Carter, who just passed away. And it was given back to Panama. Interesting. Panama was declared its independence and achieved independence in 1903 from Colombia. Who supported the independence of Panama?
U.S.?
The United States. What was one of the main strategic objectives? To build the canal.
To get canal.
The U.S. Deployed its Navy to protect Panamanian independence, supported Panama's independence, and then what did the Panamanians give the U.S.? Control over the Panama Canal zone, which they kept until 1999. So that was the territory around the canal. So the U.S. relationship to the canal goes back a long way. It helped to create an entire country, which is Panama. So I think the U.S. has an interest there. But again, I don't think the U.S. is necessarily going to want, conflict. It looks pretty aggressive, I think. And are they really going to deploy troops, try to take the canal? I just don't think it's that relevant to the U.S. So I think they'll try to negotiate something and probably will get a better deal, and that's it.
Canada.
Canada. Now, this might be the most controversial part of what I'm going to say. I don't think Trump is 100% bluffing. I think it's true. Trump is negotiating. I think he's trying to get some extractions, tariffs, other things. Maybe some resource rights. I don't know, something economic, something around tariffs. But I want to draw the audience's attention, maybe the uncomfortable attention. And again, we're not talking morality. We're talking purely realism and geopolitics. The U.S. has had its eyes on Canada from the beginning. From the beginning of the U.S. independence. The War of 1812, it was the U.S.'s first foreign war. What happened in that war? The U.S. invaded Canada to take Canada from the British. The British controlled it. There was a war. There was fighting. It was a stalemate. The British / Canadians, whoever you want to claim it was, burned the White House to the ground. Fine. That was 1812. But the U.S. has always had an interest. There's always been back channel sort of strategic thinking from the British and the U.S. over how do we protect Canada if you're the British? If you're the Canadians, how do we maintain independence? Or if you're the Americans, how do we exert influence over Canada? Other important points about Canada, which make it, I think, extremely vulnerable to American influence, which could one day become strong-arming, which may eventually end up in some sort of marriage of the two countries. 90% of Canadians live within 100 miles of the U.S. border. 60% of Canada's 40 million people, 60% of them live south of the major U.S. city of Seattle. Did you know that?
No.
I didn't even know that. That's wild.
Wait. They live
south of Seattle because you got that eastern part of Canada that actually comes down, Toronto, that area. 60% of the country south of Washington State, of Seattle. Fourth largest oil producer on the planet is Canada. Fifth largest natural gas producer. Where does most of that oil and gas go? Through American pipelines. Okay. This Northwest Passage we're talking about obviously has an implication with Greenland. That would bypass Canada. It would go between Canada and Greenland. And again, there's 40 million people who by and large speak English, share a very similar culture. We're all part of North America. Let's understand that I think this is something that deep down, in a world where the U.S. is no longer encumbered by Cold War obligations, where geopolitics has changed, where we're in this nationalistic era, where alliances are more transactional than ideological. Not the capitalism versus communism, but what's in it for me, the nationalist era, which I think we're entering into. And if the U.S. acquires Greenland, what's that going to mean? That's going to mean the U.S. is positioned on Greenland, on the U.S. mainland, Alaska, and in between is Canada. How independent is Canada in that circumstance, and how much more of an American strategic interest starts to be felt by Canada? And again, let's keep in mind, this is not coming out of nowhere. From early American days, America's had its eyes, perhaps uncomfortably, on Canada. I don't think this will happen under Trump's administration. I really don't think that at all. I think this is possibly... Okay, let me preface that again by saying I don't think this will happen under Trump's administration at all. I think this is a negotiating tactic today. I do, however, believe that one day, probably in our lifetime, the U.S. and Canada will become the same country. And I think once we add Greenland, that adds a lot of strategic weight, and America will be looking more and more enviously at Canada, a country it's, from its early days, wanted to control. Very resource rich. Again, strategically, 60% of folks are south of Seattle. That's my controversial view, that America and Canada will, in our lifetime, become the same country. Apologize to the Canadian audience if they find that uncomfortable or anything like that, but I do believe that.
For me, that sounded out of the thin air. I didn't know about the American idea of acquiring Greenland. I disagree with you about the era of realism in international relations that it's coming back, because I disagree with you in a point that I say this is the era of neorealism where we live right now, where we have this concept of hard and soft power. And what I want to say is I think it's very important of how they're going to acquire these territories or states or pieces of land, whatever we call it. I think this is what's important, because if, for example, what I believe, if the United States will try to acquire Greenland, using force, this will be a major global implications. Both of them are NATO countries. So what would happen if one NATO country basically forcefully want to take the piece of land from another NATO country? This is a disaster. This is the global security system, global political system disaster. However, that's why it's neorealism. We have the soft power, where you have the soft power, which is economic, cultural, negotiations. This is, so I think it depends on how they're going to acquire this. I don't have a strong opinion about Canada because, I don't know, it might sound very rude, but for me, from my Russian...
Don't offend the Canadians, man. Be nice to them.
You understand what I want to say.
Well, actually, I don't. But I'm just saying, be nice to our Canadian friends.
Yes. We're always nice to everybody. But I believe, culturally, from language perspective,
we're the same as well.
that looks very
We're very similar.
Yeah, very, very similar.
We say
very
about,
very
they say
similar.
about.
And like I'm sure that a huge part of population works in America or like lives here and there. I don't know the facts, but this is what I like my perception. So I don't know how, and I think it may be very logical. Like if you just look at the map, you see Alaska over here, you see the United States over here. I think it's very logical from the, again, national interest perspective, state interest perspective, like to have at least a very close alliance between these two countries, like so close that it's practically like a confederation or something like that. Like Russia and Belarus, it's different countries, but still they're so close.
They have the union state where it's essentially the same.
Yeah, it's like on paper, it's pretty much the union state. Yeah. So it's like something close to confederation, but they're still independent states. But like you have no problems to go between these two countries. So yeah, that's my take. I don't have a very strong opinion about this. Like for me, it's more of an explorational topic. I haven't heard, and I must thank you for this observation about the Greenland history and like U.S. Greenland history. I haven't heard about it at all. But I also think that one important point of Greenland is it opens another door to North Pole. And as we know, the North Pole is like today is the internationally shared area where every neighboring country has their own sector. So now in the United States, because of Alaska has one, if the United States gets Greenland, they get another sector. And then you have Russia, who has obviously the huge sector. In Nordic countries, European Nordic countries, they have their own. So America will significantly increase their influence in Arctic and North Pole. And with the like global climate change, the landscape is changing. So I can obviously see why they want to do this. I didn't know that they wanted it for a long time.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and I think we will continue to cover this topic as the news develops,
right?
And if there's any movement on any of these topics.